Welcome to another episode of Sessions. We're excited today to go meet Donald McGraw. Donald is from a small village in northern New Brunswick called Puckmush. In his gallery, what graced the walls for many, many years was a very special project that he did that took him years to accomplish and a lot of investment and time. And it was to paint large portraits of First Nation chiefs all across the province of New Brunswick. And his main goal was to bridge cultures through his art, which he accomplished. Let's go meet Donald.
I never forgot wildlife. I kept on improving. I'm not a master, but for me, as long as the bird wouldn't fly out of the painting, I would keep on trying till this day. So it wasn't only like representing the bird, it was representing the life inside that bird. But with the chiefs, the native chiefs of my province, this was the biggest step because I was going into another culture. I was going into where I had prejudice, where I was taught when I was younger, like through media, Westerns that, basically cowboys always chased Indians and they would always win and they were dangerous and all of this. But I had to approach them on a human aspect and how would they receive me? How would they see me coming? How would they perceive me? Not a white man coming for what? So there's a big event that happened. There was rioting. Their boats were burned, and it was a tragedy between cultures. It happens, prejudice and greed. So that was the time I went. And one of the chiefs I met, he said, "Where are you from?" I named my little village. "Oh," he said, "I know where you're from. You guys just burned 3 of our boats. So that's not too good for an introduction." And I was looking, and we went from there, the first contact, to me doing his portrait. And then from there, a documentary was done about this collection. And in this documentary, we're sitting at the shore, and he talks to me and he looks at me for about an hour, right in my eyes, and he shares to me like his 3 sons that he lost. One died in his arms, and we shared a lot of personal issues. And the cameras were rolling, and it's as if they weren't even there, like it was me and him. And when this was finished, we were walking over to the shore, and everybody had left, and he had a beautiful red shirt. And he took it off his back, and he handed me a shirt. And I said, "You can't do that. Please don't do that." He said, "Don, what's a gift if it's not precious to you?" Imagine, you start from a conflict where we burned their boats. You go there with respect. You're not trying to sell him anything. You take the entire responsibility. And then it ends up, and it never ended because we kept in contact. Most of the chiefs were back at home. We had supper together. There's another chief, he's on the cover of my book, famous guy in the region, is Regional Chief Roger Augustine. When I had a showing in the Provincial Museum, he was there. They were all there. A lot of crying going on that evening.
How many chiefs did you paint?
I painted 12, plus an elderly woman. And that's part of the circle now, because it became like another situation where I was challenged with life-threatening issues concerning my health. But with Roger, when we had the showing, he turned and he went to the microphone to speak, and in front of the audience he said, "Donald has not only done my portrait, he has painted my soul." Pretty heavy stuff for an artist. Like, this is the payoff, payday. And another situation, there's another chief that's very special to me. His name is Acadian. He's a Passamaquoddy. The Passamaquoddies, they're the ones that received my people, my ancestors, the French Acadians, in 1604. They are landed on a small little rock, a little island, and by the spring they were starving. And the Passamaquoddies crossed the ice and went over and brought them food and brought them medicine. And when the paintings were shown, he was present in a big event. There were a lot of people, maybe a few hundred people present. He went up on stage and he said, looking at me, he said, "Donald, you paint in 3 dimensions. I came here to offer you the 4th dimension, which is my time. Call me anywhere, any place on this planet, I'll be there for you." And I challenged this about 10 years after, when they were organizing the showing of my paintings at the museum. I figured, well, I'll give him a call, see if it's still on. But it was just like trying to invite him to a special event for me, you know. So I called, he wasn't home, left a message. 2 days later, you know, like I was outside in the yard, you know, doing chores and hauling stuff. And I was thinking about him. I figured, well, I called him 2 days ago, maybe he's out of the country or maybe he didn't have time to answer. I turned around and he's standing right beside me. I said, "You?" He said, "Don, you called?" Instead of answering my phone call, he drove a few hundred miles. So this is the payoff of my circle. Right. This is how my circle came full circle. Wow. And it's, for me, every time something would happen with a painting, I would turn around and say, "Can you imagine this is happening? Can you imagine this is happening?" I fell sick. I was receiving treatments. And one weekend I came back in between the treatments. Margaret Labillois, which I painted, was the first woman chief in this province, in my province of New Brunswick. She sent her son to my place to invite me for a sweat lodge. When he came over, he said, "Don, we never did it for a white man." He said, "We do it among our family when somebody is sick or somebody has major issues." And he explained how it was done. You just come with a little offering if you accept. It could be tobacco or whatever, and to offer to the Great Spirit. So he said it would be possible like on the weekend. Agreed on a date. So I drove there with my wife. And we got there, and behind Margaret Labillois' house, there's a dome. And that's where it's held. When we first got there, they made the ritual, different prayers and offerings. They implored the Great Spirit in the name of the Labillois, and they asked the Great Spirit to pardon them if the Labillois had offended the Great Spirit, and to ask pardon if the McGraw family had offended the Great Spirit. And we walked on our knees into this dark dome, yet prepared stones in the center of the place. And they implored, they prayed for 3 to 4 hours, the Great Spirit to spare Donald McGraw's life. We need him with us for a longer journey. When you crawl out of there, not only your physical body has been soaked out and cleansed, this is one of the spiritual events, I was raised in a certain faith, and I went to church, and I hear a lot of people around and, staring at the other people's dress or hat or whatever, but this is never seen this before in my life. And as if it wasn't enough, I was invited into their house. A long table, Marguerite Labillois, pure beauty and calmness. She reminded me of my grandma. She sat on my right. Most of her children were around the table. Her eldest son came over with big bottles of medicine that he had prepared to cleanse my blood, my body. He offered me this with his phone number if I needed some more. And they served me food. This is a heavy part. I bowed my head and I asked forgiveness for my ignorance, to have thought that they were inferior to me, to have thought that they were dangerous people, that I had to beware of them. And I promised at the end of the table that for as much as I could, and for as much as I had the possibility, that I would try to relay what I found. Because if you treat other people with dignity and respect, basically it's all they ask. It's all they want from another human being.
Working on location can be quite challenging because you never know what you're going to get as an environment, or the room or the space you're going to have to be able to work in, and how much equipment you can use, etc. Like, I've planned many photo shoots where I had an idea in mind and I wanted to use X amount of lightings, let's say 4 or 5 lights, and when I got to the space it was impossible, so I had to cut it down. But for me, that's the part that I love, because when you're on site and on location, you have to adapt to the location. The location does not adapt to you. And to me, that's the challenge. To me, that's the fun. You have to do a lot of thinking. So in this particular case, we are at Donald's house in the basement. And I just, when I saw the environment, like, of course, the ceiling is not too high, so I couldn't use a boom stand for hair light or anything like that. So I had to improvise on that side. And also, I went with a 3-light setup, 2 narrow softbox, and 1 backlight. Now, because I couldn't use a boom or for hair light or rim lighting, I couldn't do any of that, so I chose a small light in the background to separate him from the background, if you will, and just to give kind of a rim lighting or highlight the hair so he can be separated. I chose a black background, and also I asked him to wear a black t-shirt or black shirt. And this way here is really going to emphasize 2 things with him, because he's an artist. I'm doing some headshots, pretty much headshots, because the space again is quite small, so I have to stick to that. But also because his tools are the paintbrush, and because he's wearing short sleeve shirt, I will be able to use his hands later on, maybe with a paintbrush or something like that, to emphasize that part. So the skin tones are going to be what will be the portrait in a sense, because of course his face and his hands. This is what will be standing out. Now for the main lights, the two front lights that I'm using to light the subject, one of course is a main light usually, and then you have a fill light. In this particular case, I'm going a little bit different. The two soft boxes are pretty much parallel, 90 degrees to him, both facing exactly the same. I'm using the edge of the light. I turned it so the edge of the light hits him and kind of wraps around him in a sense. But because I took the lights and separated them quite a bit, so basically the lights are a good distance from him. The reason for that is the further your main lights, or in this case the two lights, are from the subject, the more direct the light will be, and of course causing contrast, which is what I want in this particular case. I want to emphasize his features. If both lights were very, very close to him, so in other words, the closer I bring the lights to the subject, the softer the light, more like a window light effect, so to speak. And but in this case, I went the opposite. So I went a little further back to give me a little bit of a harshness to the light. As you can tell, there's good distance between the two lights. The two lights are exactly at the same distance, pretty close. And I'm shooting here at about an aperture of 8 to 11. That's so my lights are set for that. Both of them are about the same. And then what it gives me the luxury of doing is then I can turn off one light and just use one light, creating dark, deep shadows on one side, as you can see in this image. The backlight, because he has light hair, is not too strong or more powerful than my two main lights. In this particular case, my main lights are set to shoot at about an aperture of about 8, and my backlight is only about 8.5 to maybe 11, one stop more. And all this does is it just highlights not only his hair, but it also separates him from the background. Because what you don't want, especially a person that would have, for an example, black hair or dark hair, you would not see that separation, and all you would see would be a face, because the hair would kind of blend into the background, so you would lose your subject. I am a big fan of using a light meter. I just, because of the preciseness of the whole thing. Light meters, I can adjust my lights to 1/10 of a stop in either direction. I can really be extremely precise on how I want each particular light to be set at. In this case, I wanted to, because he's got nice light gray hair, it can really do a nice effect. And at that point, what I can do every time I photograph, then I direct him. Once everything is set, it's all about directing, chin up, chin down, tilt your head, lean, do different things, and then I can start shooting and playing. And as he gets more comfortable, as I get more comfortable with everything I've got set, everything is organized, we're ready to go. Then I can decide to turn on all lights, turn one off. I get the luxury of playing as much as I want as we're going along and as we're both getting into groove. And for my portrait work, well, my favorite lens to use is an 85mm 1.2 lens that I can set wide open if I choose, especially if I'm doing window light photography and things like that. Or in this particular case, it's at f8 or f11, so it gives me good depth of field when I'm photographing the person. But it's a fixed focal length lens, or now people call them prime lens, and it's my favorite lens to use. High quality, beautiful optics, great results.